Forget the storybook Thanksgiving. The truth, when the Pilgrims arrived, Africans were already here, free, surviving, partnered with native nations. Half the colonists died that first winter. They had no idea how to live off this land. The real science of survival, growing rice in swamps, controlling water, preserving food, mastering crops and seasons, came from Black hands. So, why did they hand you a holiday with smiling pilgrims and not a word about Black survival? If you have never questioned who America thanks, stay sharp. This is the story they hoped you would never ask for. History books start the clock at 1620. The real timeline runs centuries deeper. Africans reached American shores long before the Mayflower ever left England. Spanish ships wrecked off the Carolina coast in 1526. Survivors were Africans, not just Spaniards. They did not vanish. They slipped into the woods, found native communities, and lived. Some escaped Spanish colonies, blending into indigenous nations up and down the coast. European explorers wrote about seeing dark men among the Indians, not as slaves, but as equals, trading, marrying, building new lives. These were not lost castaways. These were survivors, skilled in farming, hunting, and living off the land. They brought knowledge from West Africa, how to plant in swamps, how to keep food through winter, how to read the land and water. Native nations saw them as partners, not property. For nearly a century before the Pilgrims, Africans and natives built alliances that kept both alive. The official story skips over these Black roots on purpose. If you admit Africans were already here, already thriving, you must admit who held the keys to survival when the Pilgrims stumbled ashore. The real experts were already waiting. Winter hits, and the fantasy of sturdy pilgrims falls apart. Half of them are dead before spring. Graves line the dirt, dug shallow because the ground is frozen. Food runs out fast. They plant it like they did in England, tossing seeds across the ground, hoping for a miracle. All they got was mud and rot. The corn failed. The barley failed. Every mistake cost lives. By March, only 50 out of 100 are left standing. The rest are buried or washed out to sea. Their houses barely hold against the wind. Disease moves through the cramped cabins. The children cough. The old men fade. The city on a hill is nothing but a handful of starving strangers, lost in a land they do not know how to feed themselves. The stories say they were tough, but the numbers say otherwise. These settlers did not build a new world. They begged to survive in one that was already working before they arrived. Survival was not a birthright. It was a debt, and they did not have the credit to pay it off alone. The Pilgrims did not invent survival. They borrowed it from Black and Indigenous hands. When English seeds failed, it was not luck that saved them. It was knowledge carried across the Atlantic, tested in swamps and salt marshes. West Africans knew how to turn mud into gold. They built tidal gates, carved channels, and managed water like a living thing. Toe-heel planting, press the soil with your heel, drop the seed, cover with your toe. That method was the difference between a full belly and another grave. That was not English farming. That was West African science, passed along field by field. Preserving food for winter was preservation put into practice. Smoking fish, drying meat, fermenting vegetables. These were survival systems, not European recipes. One-pot stews, thick with roots and greens, stretched what little they had through hungry months. The Wampanoag knew the land. Africans brought the tricks to make food last. Together they built a system the Pilgrims could copy but could not claim. The marshes around Plymouth began to look like the lowlands of West Africa. Canals, dikes, and fields mapped by people who understood water, not just soil. That is how the colony crawled through its first years. Not by English stubbornness, but by the hands and minds of people they tried to erase. The feast that followed sat on a foundation built by Black and Indigenous survival, not Pilgrim pride. Look at the Thanksgiving table. This is not a Pilgrim story. This is a map of stolen credit. Rice steaming in a bowl, West Africa, not England. Okra in the gumbo, carried across the Atlantic by African hands, not on the Mayflower. Sweet potatoes, stews, one-pot meals, survival foods, built by people who knew how to stretch a scrap. Pilgrims did not bring these. They did not even know what they were looking at. The so-called feast was packed with indigenous crops, corn, beans, squash, the three sisters. That is agricultural science, not luck. Natives planted them together, each crop feeding the next, rebuilding the soil year after year. The English called it strange. Africans called it smart. Every bite on that table tells a story of Black and Native genius. Rice did not grow in Europe. It thrived in the swamps of West Africa, where farmers built canals and dikes, managed floods, and turned marsh into wealth. When rice fields exploded in the Carolinas, planters paid top dollar for Africans from the rice coast, not for muscle, for knowledge. Okra followed the same route. It is a heat-loving plant, useless to the English, but a staple for Africans who knew how to coax green from nothing. Stews and soups, thick with roots and greens, were not comfort food. They were survival plans designed to last through lean months. Thanksgiving food is not English. It is Black. It is Native. The table itself is proof. Every year, Americans eat the evidence and call it tradition, never asking who built the system that kept them alive. That is not a feast. That is a cover-up. If Black hands built the survival system behind Thanksgiving, why are Pilgrims the heroes? Choose a side. Colonial governments saw what was happening. Black and Native alliances were a threat, so they moved fast to break them. By the 1670s, new laws hit the books. Any Native caught sheltering an African faced fines, whippings, or worse. Africans living with Native families were dragged back, punished, or sold. These were not random rules. They were survival tactics for the colonists, designed to divide and weaken people who had kept each other alive. Unity meant resistance. Resistance meant trouble for colonial power. The meaning of Thanksgiving shifted too. Early Thanksgiving days were not about gratitude. They were victory parties after crushing Native resistance. In 1637, the Massachusetts Bay Colony declared a day of thanks after soldiers massacred hundreds of Pequot people. The feast was not for peace. It was a celebration of conquest. Every time colonists survived another year or wiped out another village, they threw a feast and called it Thanksgiving. The story was always written by the winners. By the 1800s, the narrative got a new coat of paint. In 1841, a footnote by Reverend Alexander Young called the 1621 feast the first Thanksgiving. That single line rewrote the holiday. Suddenly, it was about pilgrims and natives sharing a meal. No mention of black hands. No mention of laws breaking families apart. No mention of the blood spilled to clear the land. The myth spread like wildfire into school books, into stories, into smiling children in paper hats. Pilgrims became heroes. Black and native survival vanished from the page. This was not history. This was erasure. It was carefully planned, locked into law, and baked into the stories told to every American child. Every November, millions still gather around tables shaped by Black and Indigenous hands, whether they know it or not. Erasure is not just history, it is power. The stories we hide decide who belongs. So, who gets to claim survival? That answer is still up for grabs. Drop your thoughts below.